I manage a hostel in Berlin, and last month, an American showed up for a 3-week stay. I'm thinking backpacker, gap year, maybe burnt out from work. He checks in, drops his bags, then immediately opens his laptop at the breakfast table. Every morning for 3 weeks, he's there at 7 a.m. on video calls, typing away. I ask if he's working remotely. He says, "No, I'm on vacation." I tell him that doesn't look like vacation. He explains his company has unlimited PTO, so he can take as much time as he wants, and he wanted to see Berlin. But he also needs to stay on top of things because there's a big project. I point out he's been here 18 days and hasn't left the hostel, except for groceries. He says that's the beauty of unlimited PTO, total flexibility. I ask how many days he took last year. He pauses, counts on his fingers, and says maybe 9 days total, but those were mostly checking email from the beach. The man flew 5,000 miles to do exactly what he does at home. Except now, there's a different wall behind his weeb. In Stuttgart told me her company switched to unlimited PTO 3 years ago, and she thought she'd hit the jackpot. She was excited, planning trips to Italy and the Alps. Then her first vacation request got denied because of team capacity. Her second request sat in limbo for 6 weeks. By the third attempt, she'd given up and just stopped asking. She took 4 days off that year. When I asked why she didn't push harder, she said there's no policy to point to anymore, just vibes. Under the old system, she had 15 days guaranteed. Now she has unlimited days in theory and 0 days in practice. She told me the cruel irony is that her German colleagues take their full 30 days every single year like clockwork. No guilt, no drama, and she's sitting there, afraid to take a long weekend. She quit last month. My cousin works HR at a software company in Munich, and they recently hired an American engineer who'd been sold on unlimited PTO at his previous job in Seattle. First week, my cousin's going through benefits and mentions the mandatory 20 days minimum by law. Plus the company gives 30 days total. The American interrupts and says that's cute, but he's used to unlimited, so he'll probably need more flexibility than that. My cousin blinks at him and says 30 days is 30 days. You take them. It's the law. There's no negotiation. The American launches into this speech about how unlimited PTO respects employees and treats them like adults. My cousin points out that in Germany, the employer is legally required to ensure you take your full vacation. And if you don't, the employer can face penalties. It's not respect. It's a labor protection. The American insists unlimited is better because it shows trust. My cousin asks how many days he actually took under unlimited PTO. The answer is 11 days over 2 years. My cousin points out that's less than half of what German law guarantees annually. So where's the benefit? The American says he could have taken more if he'd wanted to. My cousin says the operative word is could've, not did. They moved on, but I heard the guy used all 30 days his first year and kept talking about how it felt illegal to take that much time off. And we get a lot of international guests. American couple checks in for a week, and during their intake, I ask about their vacation plans for the year. The wife mentions this is their only vacation because her husband's company has unlimited PTO, but it's hard to actually use it. I ask what she means by hard. She explains there's no formal approval process, so nobody knows if it's okay to take time off until you ask. And by then, it's usually too late because someone else has already taken that week, or there's a deadline. Her husband adds that his boss takes maybe 5 days a year, so taking more than that feels excessive. I mention that in Germany, managers are often required to model taking vacation, and employees can report managers who don't take their full allotment. The husband laughs and says that sounds like communist propaganda, but he's joking, sort of. I tell him Germans average about 30 vacation days a year, plus public holidays, and most people take every single one. He gets quiet and then mutters something about how Americans are more dedicated to work. His wife gives him a look that could melt steel. My brother's a union rep at a manufacturing plant in Hanover. And last year, they had a consultation with an American firm about productivity strategies. The Americans kept pushing this unlimited PTO model as a cost-saving measure that also boosts morale. My brother asked how it saves costs if employees can take unlimited time. The consultant explains that because there's no accrual, there's no payout liability when people leave. My brother pauses and says that sounds like the company's just avoiding paying people what they're owed. The consultant clarifies that employees aren't owed anything under unlimited PTO. Hey, there's no bank of ours, no debt on the balance sheet. My brother asks what happens if someone takes 40 days off in a year. The consultant admits that would probably be frowned upon, maybe even grounds for termination. So it's not really unlimited, my brother says. The consultant pivots to talking about flexibility and trust. My brother points out that German law already mandates a minimum that must be paid out upon termination. So this unlimited model wouldn't even be legal here without major modifications. The consultant suggests maybe Germany is behind the times on progressive HR practices. My brother reminds him that German workers have 6 weeks minimum by law, protected by unions, and enforceable in court, while Americans with unlimited PTO are taking fewer days than ever and getting nothing when they quit. The meeting ended shortly after that. I'm a career counselor in Frankfurt. I had an American client who'd just relocated for a job at a tech company. He was thrilled about the 30 vacation days and kept saying it was way more than his unlimited PTO back home. I asked how many days he'd taken under that system. He said maybe 12 over 3 years total. I pointed out that 30 guaranteed days per year means 90 days over 3 years. He does the math, realizes he'd missed out on 78 days of paid vacation, and his face goes pale. He asks if that's legal, for a company to call something unlimited, but make it functionally impossible to use. I tell him it's legal in the US because there's no federal mandate. So companies can structure PTO however they want, as long as they pay out unused accrued time in states that require it. But with unlimited PTO, there's no accrual, so there's nothing to pay. He sits there processing this, and then says he thought unlimited meant more freedom, not less. I explained that in Germany. Vacation isn't a privilege you earn by working hard enough or not inconveniencing your team. It's a legal right that employers must enforce. He asks what happens if you don't take it. I tell him you lose it after March 31st of the following year, unless there's documented illness. He says that's harsh. I point out he voluntarily lost 78 days and got $0 for it. My wife runs a cafe in Cologne, and we had an American remote worker who'd set up camp there for a few weeks. He's on a call with his team, and we overhear him saying he's taking a working vacation, which apparently means working from Germany instead of working from his apartment. After the call, my wife asks why he's working on vacation. He says he's using his unlimited PTO, but his team still needs him available for critical meetings. My wife points out that's not a vacation, that's relocation. He insists it counts because he's in a different country. She asks if his company is paying for his travel as a work expense since he's working. He says no, this is personal time. She's confused because he's clearly working 8-hour days just with a different view. He explains that unlimited PTO means he can blend work and life however he wants. My wife says that in Germany, when you're on vacation, you're legally off the grid. It's unreachable, and if your employer contacts you, they can face penalties. He laughs and says, that would never work in America. Everyone's always on. She tells him that sounds less like unlimited vacation and more like unlimited work availability. He says it's about flexibility and being a team player. My wife suggests maybe he's being taken advantage of, and he gets defensive. He left the next day and gave us a 2-star review for being judgmental about. It's American work culture. I'm a tour guide in Heidelberg. And I once had an American couple who mentioned they were on unlimited PTO. I assumed they were taking a month to travel Europe. They said, no, just 9 days, because even though it's unlimited, you can't really take more than a week without people thinking you're slacking. I asked why it's called unlimited if there's a functional limit. The husband says it's more of a philosophy than a number. I pointed out that philosophy doesn't guarantee you a vacation. He agrees, but says the old system was worse because you had a fixed number of days, and if you didn't use them, you lost them. I mentioned that in Germany, unused vacation must be taken by March of the following year, or it's forfeited, but employers are required to actively encourage and facilitate employees taking their time. The wife asks what happens if the employer doesn't encourage it. I explain the employer can be liable and the employee can sue. The husband says that would never fly in the US too much litigation risk. I point out that the litigation risk in the US apparently isn't enough to stop companies from creating unlimited PTO systems where employees take less time off than before. The wife admits she took 14 days last year under a traditional system, and now she's taking 9 under unlimited. Her husband says at least they don't have to track accruals. I suggest they're trading guaranteed vacation for corporate goodwill. And the corporation is winning. My daughter's a nurse in Dusseldorf, and one of her colleagues recently left a US hospital system to work in Germany. She told my daughter she'd been lured to her old job by unlimited PTO, but after 2 years, she'd only taken 6 days off because the staffing was always critical and asking for time felt like abandoning patients. In Germany, she's guaranteed 30 days. And the hospital actually schedules mandatory vacation periods to ensure coverage is planned in advance. She said the first time she took 2 consecutive weeks off, she kept expecting angry texts or emergency calls. Nothing came. She called the unit on day 4 of her vacation just to check in, and her supervisor told her to hang up immediately and enjoy her time. If she called again, there'd be a formal note in her file. She couldn't believe it. In the US, she'd been praised for answering emails on vacation and covering shifts on her days off. In Germany, that behavior is actively discouraged because it undermines the entire system. She told my daughter that unlimited PTO felt like freedom until she realized it was just unpaid overtime with better branding. She took her full 30 days last year and felt guilty about it for the first 15 days until she realized nobody back at the hospital even noticed she was gone because they'd planned for her absence like professionals. I manage a restaurant in Leipzig, and we hosted a corporate dinner for a US company that had opened a satellite office here. Their VP is giving a speech about company culture, and he mentions they have unlimited PTO to show they trust their employees. One of our German hires raises his hand and asks how many days the VP took last year. The VP says he doesn't track it, but probably around 10 days. The German points out that's a third of what he's guaranteed by law here. The VP says the German system is rigid, whereas unlimited PTO is fluid. The German asks what happens if someone takes 60 days. The VP hesitates and says that would require a conversation. So it's not unlimited, the German clarifies. The VP says there are unwritten norms. The German asks how an employee is supposed to know those norms without documentation. The VP pivots to talking about flexibility, but the German isn't done. He asks if unused unlimited PTO gets paid out upon termination. The VP admits it doesn't. The German points out that in the US, traditional PTO often does get paid out depending on state law, so unlimited PTO actually removes a financial benefit. The VP says it removes a liability for the company. The German responds that it sounds like the liability was removed from the company and transferred to the employee, who now has fewer guaranteed days and no payout. The room went silent. The VP suggested they return to dinner. Later I asked the German if he felt he'd been too direct. He said no, he'd been accurate. I work at a train station in Nuremberg, and an American approached my counter looking stressed. He'd been in Germany for a week on what he called unlimited PTO, but he'd spent most of the trip on his laptop at cafes. He wanted to know if there was reliable Wi-Fi on the train to Munich because he had a meeting. I asked if he was traveling for work. He said no, for vacation, but his team needed him on a call. I pointed out that in Germany, being on vacation means being unavailable for work. He said his company's unlimited PTO policy lets him decide his own boundaries. I asked what his boundary was. He thought about it and admitted he didn't really have one because if he was too unavailable, people might think he was taking advantage. I suggested that sounded like he wasn't on vacation at all, just working from different locations. He insisted it was still vacation because he wasn't in an office. I told him that Germans would consider what he's doing to be a work trip, not a vacation, and if his company wanted him available, they should be covering his travel costs. He said that'd be nice, but that's not how unlimited PTO works. I asked how it does work. He said you take time off, but you stay reachable, and you manage your own workload. I pointed out that's the definition of remote work, not vacation. He bought his ticket and left. But I saw him on the platform still on a video call when the train departed. My uncle's a taxi driver in Freiburg. and he picked up an American woman from the airport who was visiting for her company's European office opening. During the ride, she mentioned her company just rolled out unlimited PTO and she was excited to finally take a real vacation. My uncle asked when. She said maybe next year, after things settle down. He pointed out she could take it now since it's unlimited. She explained it doesn't really work that way because her team is understaffed and she's in the middle of a big project. My uncle said that sounds like she doesn't have unlimited PTO, she has perpetually delayed PTO. She laughed but admitted he wasn't wrong. She said the policy sounds great in theory, but in practice, she took 8 days last year, all of them checking email. My uncle mentioned that in Germany, employees get a minimum of 20 days by law. Most get 30, and you can't work on vacation or the time doesn't count. She asked how that's enforced. He said labor laws, unions, and cultural norms. She said that'd never work in America because everyone's expected to hustle. My uncle said it sounds like everyone's expected to burn out. She went quiet for a bit, then asked if Germans really take all their vacation. He said yes, and if they don't, it's considered wasteful and possibly a sign the employer is violating labor protections. She said that perspective would never fly in her company. My uncle dropped her off and she gave him a big tip, then asked if he was hiring. I'm a flight attendant for Lufthansa, and I was working a route from New York to Berlin. American passenger in business class is on his laptop the entire flight, barely touches his meal. I ask if everything's okay. He says fine, just catching up on work before his vacation officially starts. I mention we're about to land, so his vacation should start any minute. He says not really because he's got meetings scheduled for tomorrow morning, Berlin time. I ask if his company is paying for this trip since he's working. He says no, he's using unlimited PTO, but he needs to stay engaged with the team. I point out that sounds like a work trip disguised as personal time. He insists it's vacation because he chose to come to Berlin. I ask how many hours he'll work while he's here. He estimates maybe 4 hours a day. I tell him that in Germany, working on vacation is essentially illegal because it violates rest period protections. He says his company's American, so German law doesn't apply. I clarify that if he's working from German soil, he's subject to local labor law. He looks panicked and asks if he could be fined. I tell him probably not as an individual, but his company could face scrutiny if someone reported it. He closes his laptop. 20 minutes later, he reopens it. I let it go, but when we landed, he asked me how Germans managed to take so much time off. I told him they're guaranteed it by law, and their employers plan around it. He said that sounds too structured. One suggested structure beats burnout. I run a bike rental shop in Hamburg, and last summer, an American rented a bike for a week. He mentioned he was on unlimited PTO and wanted to explore the city. Every day he'd come back after an hour, return the bike, and say he had to hop on a quick call. Day 3, I asked how the vacation was going. He said great, except he's been working about 6 hours a day. I pointed out that's not a vacation. He said, it's flexible vacation. I asked if he's getting paid for those 6 hours. He said no, he's on PTO. I suggested that sounds like unpaid work. He insists it's voluntary. He wants to stay connected. I asked if he'd be fired for not staying connected. He admitted probably not fired, but maybe passed over for promotions or seen as less committed. I told him that in Germany, employees are protected from retaliation for taking their legal vacation. He said that's a nice safety net, but it sounds restrictive. I pointed out he's working for free on his vacation because he's afraid of career consequences, which sounds more restrictive than a law that guarantees him rest. He returned the bike early and left Hamburg 2 days ahead of schedule because a project needed him. I asked if he'd get those 2 days back. He said no. But that's the trade-off for unlimited PTO. I told him it sounded like the company got the better end of that trade. I teach at a business school in Stuttgart. Last semester, we had an American exchange professor who complained about German work culture being too rigid. She said unlimited PTO gives employees autonomy, and Germany's mandatory vacation laws are paternalistic. I asked her how many days she took last year under her unlimited policy. She said 7. I pointed out that's less than a third of what German law requires. So who's actually getting more autonomy? She argued that she chose to take 7 days, whereas Germans are forced to take 30. I asked if her choosing to take 7 days while working 55-hour weeks was really a choice or just a response to workplace pressure. She didn't answer. A few months later, she mentioned she'd been diagnosed with burnout. Her doctor told her to take a month off. She said she couldn't because her position doesn't have backup coverage and she'd fallen too far behind. I asked what the point of unlimited PTO is if you can't use it when you need it.